She regretted the blind date until his daughter walked in and said, "You're the one from Daddy's favorite story." Isabella Harris sat at the far corner of a quaint little cafe nestled within a snow-dusted park. Her long blonde hair was tied back neatly, a few loose strands brushing her cheek as she sipped her tea. The muted glow of late afternoon light filtered through the frosted windows, casting soft shadows on the wooden floor. Her coat, tailored and minimalist, matched the elegant simplicity of her entire look, poised, timeless. She glanced at her watch again, not out of impatience, but out of habit. This was her fourth blind date in 3 months. And though she was not annoyed, she felt the familiar, dull ache of disappointment pressing against her ribs. These dates always felt the same. People listing job titles, achievements, dream vacations, always chasing something shiny, rarely asking, "How do you feel?" Her best friend had begged her to give it one more shot. "Come on, Issa, just one more. Maybe your heart just needs the right moment, not the right resume." So here she was, in a cafe that smelled of cinnamon and roasted beans, waiting for a stranger she already suspected would feel like everyone else. The doorbell chimed. Isabella looked up. Jason Miller entered, tall and broad-shouldered, shaking light snow from his jacket. He wore jeans, work boots, and a forest green flannel shirt under a heavy coat. Nothing trendy, but everything worn with quiet ease. His hair was a bit messy, his hands slightly rough. He scanned the room, saw her, and gave a small nod before walking over. "Hi, Isabella?" he asked. She stood to greet him with a warm but measured smile. "Yes, Jason, right?" He nodded again. "Thanks for meeting me." His voice was low and unhurried. They sat down, the conversation starting with the usual pleasantries. Jason admitted he was not good at small talk, and Isabella appreciated the honesty, though their words still felt like two puzzle pieces that did not quite fit. He told her he was a carpenter, mostly furniture, custom orders, local shops. Isabella nodded politely. "That's rare these days. Working with your hands, I mean." Jason smiled faintly. "Keeps me grounded." She told him about her work in fashion design, luxury pieces, demanding clients, constant travel. He listened, asking a few thoughtful questions, but she felt the gap between their worlds widen with every answer. Still, he was kind. That much was clear. He spoke with care, not trying to impress, and that alone was something. But as the minutes passed, Isabella felt herself pulling away. It was not unpleasant, but it was not meaningful either. She had hoped, maybe foolishly, for a flicker of connection, and it simply was not there. She opened her mouth to gently excuse herself when the door of the cafe burst open. A little girl, around 4 years old, bounded in with wide eyes and pink cheeks flushed from the cold. Her curly blonde hair bounced as she ran straight toward their table. She wore a puffy coat and underneath, a pink dress with tiny embroidered stars. "Daddy," she called out, launching herself into Jason's arms. "That's her, the lady from your favorite story." Jason froze, arms instinctively catching her. Isabella turned, startled, unsure what was happening. The girl looked up at her with the most delighted grin. "You said her hair looks like sunshine. I knew it had to be her." Jason looked mortified. "Anna, honey," he began, but the girl was already pulling a folded piece of paper from her coat pocket. She handed it to Isabella. It was a child's drawing. 3 stick figures, a house, and a giant sun with yellow rays. One of the stick figures had bright yellow hair and a pink dress. "That's you," Anna declared proudly. "You're the lady from the story Daddy tells me before bed." Isabella stared at the picture, speechless. Jason cleared his throat, eyes apologetic. "I might have made up a bedtime story, just something silly to help her sleep." Isabella blinked. Her heart, so often guarded, stirred in her chest. And in that moment, the blind date she had nearly walked away from turned into something far more magical than she could have ever imagined. Isabella sat still, the child's drawing still in her hands. Anna's small fingers had wrapped tightly around her father's sleeve as she stood beaming at Isabella, as if a fairy tale had just come to life before her eyes. Jason looked both embarrassed and helplessly amused. "Sorry about that," he murmured, his deep voice softer now. "She has a very vivid imagination." But Isabella wasn't annoyed. In fact, for the first time in a long while, she felt a strange warmth in her chest. "Do you always tell her stories like that?" she asked, smiling gently at Anna. Jason scratched the back of his neck, sheepish. "Just one. A bedtime story I made up when she was scared of sleeping alone. It's about a woman with sunshine hair who comes into a little house and makes everything feel warm again." He glanced at Anna, who nodded solemnly, as if verifying the truth of the tale. "It helped her feel safe," he added. Isabella's smile faded slightly. She had not felt safe in years. She studied Jason again. His flannel shirt still had a trace of sawdust on the cuff. His hands were worn from labor, but his touch on Anna's back was careful and protective. He had none of the polish of the men she usually met. No Rolex, no fast car parked outside. But there was something different here. Something quietly strong. And Anna was just staring at her like she was magic. "I guess I can stay a little longer," Isabella said, folding the drawing and placing it gently on the table. Anna clapped her hands. Jason looked relieved. They left the cafe not long after, walking through the park as the last light of day faded into soft twilight. Anna skipped ahead, humming a tune from a Disney film. "I hope this wasn't too strange," Jason said, walking beside her. "She insisted on meeting you. I told her this was just a coffee with someone I didn't know, but she's persistent." Isabella chuckled. "She's adorable. And honestly, persistent is a compliment in my world." He smiled. "She gets that from her mom." They fell into a thoughtful silence. "What happened to her mom?" Isabella asked gently. Jason took a slow breath. "She passed away when Anna was 2. Leukemia. It happened fast. One minute we were a family of 3, and then it was just us." "I'm sorry," Isabella said quietly. Jason nodded. "It was hard. Still is, some days. But Anna's the reason I keep going. I tell her stories because, well, that's how we hold on to hope, right?" They paused near a frozen pond where families were skating. Anna pointed at a girl's glittery scarf and spun around, pretending to twirl like a ballerina. "She really believes in your story," Isabella said. Jason nodded, watching his daughter with quiet pride. "She believes in a lot of things. I just wanted to give her someone to look up to, someone kind, someone gentle, someone better than the world sometimes is." Isabella felt her throat tighten. "That's a lot of faith to put in a bedtime story." "Maybe," Jason said, "but kids can tell the truth better than most adults. She saw something in you I haven't seen in years. Hope." Isabella looked down at the path beneath her feet, snow crunching lightly under her boots. All her life, she had been chasing perfection, guarding herself against disappointment, teaching herself that love was always conditional. Expensive dinners, polished appearances, tidy endings. But here was a man who built furniture with his hands and spun bedtime stories, not for romance, but survival. And a little girl who looked at her like she had stepped out of a dream. Isabella lifted her gaze and looked at Jason again, her voice soft. "Why do you think she thought I was the one?" Jason met her eyes. "Because I told her the woman in the story would have hair like sunshine and a heart that shines even brighter. And the moment Anna saw you, she just knew." They walked in silence for a few more steps, the night growing colder, but Isabella felt warmer than she had in months. She used to think love was a lie. Now, standing beside a carpenter and his daughter who believed in magic, she wasn't so sure anymore. The next Saturday, Isabella showed up at Jason's workshop, holding a brown paper bag with lunch and a hesitant smile on her face. The small building stood behind an old barn, surrounded by stacks of reclaimed wood and the scent of pine and sawdust. Through the open door, she saw Jason bent over a work table, chiseling the edge of a chair leg while Anna sat cross-legged nearby on a small stool, coloring a page with big, careful strokes. And then the Sunshine Lady brought soup to the tired king, Jason was saying, his voice soft and animated. Anna gasped. And did the king smile? Jason chuckled. He said it was the best soup he'd ever had. At the sound of Isabella's footsteps, Anna turned and squealed, dropping her crayon. You came back, just like in the story. Isabella crouched and opened her arms, letting the little girl launch into her with full force. She laughed, surprised by how good the embrace felt. I brought lunch, she said, lifting the bag. Jason looked up from his work and wiped his hands on a towel. You didn't have to. I wanted to, she replied simply. They sat on a bench outside under the pale winter sun, eating sandwiches and passing warm cider from a thermos. Jason's cooking was simple, slightly over-toasted bread, soup that was a little too salty, but every bite felt sincere. Conversation flowed more easily now. Isabella shared stories of her childhood, of a house with too many rules and not enough warmth. My mother expected perfection at all times. She still does, she said, her voice quieter near the end. Jason nodded in understanding. My wife, Claire, she was the opposite. She believed in making mistakes, said life was messier than we planned, but that was the good part. He paused, watching Anna chase a bird across the yard. Her last words to me were, "Don't teach her to quit. Teach her to hope." Isabella looked at him, her eyes softening. That evening, they invited her to stay for dinner. Jason fumbled in the kitchen, nearly burning the rice, but Anna helped stir the soup and set the table with unmatched plates. They laughed through the chaos, the space between them growing smaller with each shared glance. After dinner, Jason stepped aside to clean up, while Isabella took a seat beside Anna on the couch. Can you read me a story? The little girl asked, holding up a well-worn book. Of course. Isabella smiled, taking the book. As she read, Anna curled up in her lap, thumb tucked in her mouth, eyelids fluttering shut. Her breathing slowed. Jason returned to the doorway, leaning against the frame, watching silently. Isabella looked down at the girl, then up at the man who had built this little life with love and bedtime stories. For a moment, the noise of the world, the pressures of her career, the expectations, the deadlines, all faded. She did not think about emails, or strategy meetings, or sales reports. She thought only of the way Anna's hand rested lightly on her arm, the way Jason's eyes crinkled when he smiled, and the way this small, imperfect world made her feel more herself than anything else had in years. Something warm bloomed in her chest. She did not name it yet, but she knew one thing with sudden clarity. She did not want to leave. The Harris estate was everything Isabella had grown up in and grown tired of. Crystal chandeliers, soft string music, champagne flutes that never emptied, and conversations so polished they felt rehearsed. Jason stood tall in his best shirt, slightly wrinkled from the drive, and Anna held tightly to his hand, her pink dress fluttering as they walked up the marble steps. Isabella greeted them at the door with a nervous smile and fixed Jason's collar. Just be yourself, she whispered. That's all I need you to be. Inside, heads turned. Margaret Harris stood near the fireplace, dressed in navy silk, her expression unreadable, as she watched her daughter lead the carpenter and his daughter into the room. She offered a polite nod, nothing more. Dinner was served under a crystal chandelier the size of a small car. Jason tried his best, using the right fork, keeping his back straight. Anna sat beside Isabella, swinging her feet and coloring quietly, while adults talked stocks, charities, and European villas. Then came the question. So, Anna, a distant cousin cooed, what prep school do you go to? Jason cleared his throat. She's not in a private school. I can't afford the tuition. A moment of silence fell over the table. Wine glasses paused midair. Margaret spoke, her voice smooth but cool. Not everyone is meant to reach the same heights. Some dreams belong to other skies. Isabella froze. Jason's hand tensed beside his plate. No one else seemed to notice. The conversation rolled on. Stock markets, art auctions. But at that table, a fracture had opened wide. After dessert, Jason leaned toward Isabella. "We should go. It's getting late." "But you just got here," she whispered, panic rising. He stood gently, lifting Anna into his arms. "Thank you for the evening," he said to the room. Margaret gave a tight smile, not bothering to rise. Isabella followed them out to the coat room. "Jason, wait, please." He turned, his jaw tight, eyes shadowed. "I told you my family could be difficult." She tried, reaching for him. "You did," he said softly. "But I thought maybe it wouldn't matter. I thought maybe this was our story now." Anna looked up from his shoulder. "Is Mommy Princess okay?" Jason's voice broke as he answered. "She is, sweetheart. She's just living in a different castle." He turned to Isabella. "Anna thinks you're the princess from my bedtime stories, the one who brings light into our home. But I won't let her watch you get dimmed by people who don't think we're enough." Isabella's chest tightened. "Jason, He shook his head gently. "You don't need to choose. I already did. I choose her. Always." And with that, he walked away into the night. Isabella stood alone under the ornate archway, the soft sounds of the party drifting through the door behind her. Her mother approached from the shadows, glass in hand. "That was dramatic," Margaret said, sipping her wine. Isabella's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them away. "You did not have to humiliate him. I simply stated the truth. That world is not yours, nor is it hers. She is a child, and he is a good man." Margaret sighed. "Isabella, love is not enough. Not in the real world." Isabella turned to face her mother fully. "Maybe not your world." She walked back into the house, heels clicking against marble, the tightness in her throat harder to ignore now. For the first time in years, Isabella felt the weight of her choices pressing from all sides. Duty to her family, fear of losing their approval, and the painful, undeniable realization that she had already lost something far more important. 2 weeks passed in silence. Isabella kept telling herself it was for the best, that she had done the right thing walking away. But every night, as she curled up in her cold apartment with untouched takeout and half-read manuscripts, she could not stop thinking about Anna's drawing, or the way Jason's voice cracked when he said, "I choose her. Always." She expected Jason to be angry, maybe even hurt, but she never expected what came next. One snowy afternoon, Margaret Harris arrived home earlier than usual. Her chauffeur was not with her. Her heels clicked sharply down the hallway, but her expression was unreadable, until she stepped into the kitchen and set down her gloves with a quiet sigh. Isabella looked up from her tea. "Is everything all right?" Margaret poured herself a glass of water. "My car broke down." Isabella raised an eyebrow. "You were driving?" "No," Margaret replied dryly. "The driver canceled. Something about the flu. I had errands and decided to manage on my own. Poor decision." "What happened?" "The engine smoked. Somewhere near the outskirts. That older neighborhood." Isabella's chest tightened. "Was anyone hurt?" "No." Margaret paused, swirling the glass in her hand. "A man helped. Tall, strong build, wore a tool belt." Isabella froze. Margaret looked directly at her. "He said nothing about you. Just fixed the engine in 10 minutes, refused payment, and told me to keep a blanket in the car. Something about the cold being unforgiving." A pause. And then a little girl came out. Blonde curls, pink dress, called me, ma'am, and thanked me for taking care of her daddy's sunshine. Isabella's voice was barely a whisper. "Anna." Margaret nodded slowly, as if replaying the scene in her mind. She reminded me of you, when you were that age, unafraid to love, out loud. Silence settled between them like fresh snow. That evening, Isabella wandered her apartment restlessly. She passed the sketch pad where Anna had once drawn a picture of the three of them. She had tucked it away after the fight, unable to look at it. Now, she pulled it out. 3 stick figures, one tall man with brown hair, one golden-haired woman in a flowing dress, and a girl in pink, holding both their hands. In the corner, Anna had written in careful letters, "My happy ever after." Isabella clutched the paper to her chest. That night, the snow fell thicker than usual. Street lamps cast halos of light onto the sidewalk as Isabella stood in front of Jason's workshop, heart pounding. She hesitated only a second before knocking. Jason opened the door, sleeves rolled up, sawdust in his hair. He looked exactly the same, and yet, something in his eyes was quieter now. Isabella looked up at him, snow clinging to her coat. "I was wrong," she said. "I thought I had to choose between the life I knew and the love I felt. But I do not want to live half a life." Jason studied her face, his expression unreadable. "I want both," she continued. "You, Anna, my family, a new kind of family, one we make, not one that's given." Behind him, Anna peeked around the corner, her eyes lit up. "Mommy princess." Jason turned, a soft breath escaping his lips. When he looked back at Isabella, something in him eased. "I don't need an apology," he said quietly. "I just need to know you're here. Not for Anna, not for me, but for what we believe is worth fighting for." "I am," she whispered. He stepped forward and pulled her into his arms, holding her against the cold, against the doubt, against the silence of 2 long weeks. Anna ran up and hugged them both. "Can we read the story again? The one where the princess comes back?" Jason smiled. "We'll write a new one tonight." And this time, Isabella stayed. The children's art gallery was buzzing with laughter and bright colors. Handmade drawings lined the walls, stories told in crayon and watercolors by tiny hands with big hearts. Isabella stood near the entrance, dressed in a soft cream coat, her golden hair tucked behind her ear. She glanced nervously toward the door. Jason was helping Anna rehearse her poem for the 5th time behind the curtain. The little girl, in her favorite pink dress, held her paper tightly, her curls bouncing with excitement. And then, the door creaked open. Margaret Harris stepped in. Dressed in her signature tailored navy coat, pearl earrings glinting under the soft lights, she looked every bit the high society woman she had always been. But there was something different in her step, slower, more thoughtful. Isabella met her with a tentative smile. "Thank you for coming." Margaret gave a short nod. "Let us see what your little girl has prepared." "My little girl," Isabella echoed, voice trembling just slightly. When the MC called Anna's name, Jason lifted her gently onto the small stage. She stood at the microphone, gripping her poem with both hands. Her cheeks were pink with nervousness, but her voice rang clear. "My daddy tells the best stories, about sawdust and stars and trees. But the best story he told me was about someone just like me. A lady with golden hair, kind eyes, and a smile so wide. She came into our home and never once tried to hide. I did not know what a mommy felt like until I met her and everything turned bright. Now I have 2 hands to hold, a heart that feels warm when the world is cold. I found a mommy in the lady with the golden hair, and that is the story I love to share." The room erupted in gentle applause. Jason's eyes shimmered. Isabella wiped a tear before it could fall. Margaret was silent. But then she stepped forward, her heels clicking softly on the wooden floor as she made her way to Anna. She placed one elegant hand on the little girl's shoulder and said, not to the crowd, but to the child, "My granddaughter has talent." Jason blinked. Isabella's mouth parted in surprise. Anna beamed like the sun. Later that evening, they all gathered around the modest wooden table in Jason's small but cozy home. The smell of roasted chicken and fresh-baked bread filled the room. Jason had cleaned the place up in anticipation, though Isabella had told him 1,000 times it did not matter. Margaret, surprisingly, had accepted the dinner invitation. Now, she sat at the head of the table, posture perfect but no longer cold. She took a bite. The potatoes are surprisingly pleasant. Jason glanced at Isabella, who nearly laughed behind her napkin. Anna reached across to offer Margaret a second helping of bread. After the meal, Margaret reached into her handbag. "I kept something," she said, "from a time when I believed little girls should be made of silence and symmetry." She held out a small velvet box and opened it. Inside was a delicate silver hair clip, shaped like a tiny butterfly. It was slightly tarnished but still beautiful. "This belonged to your mommy when she was just your age," Margaret said, turning to Anna. "And I think it will look perfect on you." Anna gasped and threw her arms around Margaret, who awkwardly patted her back but did not pull away. Jason looked across the table at Isabella. No words were needed. In that room, with leftover chicken, glitter-covered school drawings on the wall, and a little girl in pink spinning around with a silver clip in her curls, something was completed. A family, not by blood, but by choice, by effort, and by love. 1 year later, life had changed, not with grand gestures, but with quiet, steady love. In a small lakeside town, a cozy shop opened its doors each morning. The Story Nook and Cafe sat nestled between a flower shop and a used bookstore. Inside, the scent of fresh coffee mixed with aged paper and sawdust. Jason had built the shelves himself, polished wood, rounded edges. Isabella had designed the reading corners, each nook filled with cushions and soft lighting. Together, they had created something warm and lasting. Jason worked in the back, crafting wooden decorations and handmade toys. Isabella ran story time for children, often sitting cross-legged with Anna in her lap, reading fairy tales. Anna, now in 1st grade, wore a pink dress every Monday. "It brings luck," she told anyone who asked. She had become a little star in the town. Everyone knew her as the sunshine of the town. Her golden curls, boundless energy, and kind heart left a trail of warmth wherever she went. At home, laughter echoed in the kitchen as Jason learned new recipes and burned half of them. Isabella planted herbs on the windowsill. Life was simple, but never dull. Margaret called every week. Her video calls were less stiff now, more curious. She sent books for Anna, story collections from her own childhood. During calls, she would quiz Anna on spelling and grammar, correcting gently, always smiling. Once, a neighbor asked Margaret while she was visiting, "Is that your real granddaughter?" Margaret looked at Anna, who was tracing letters on the window with her breath. She answered quietly, "What is blood, if not the people who make you proud every day?" People in town noticed. The woman once seen as distant was now often spotted buying cookies for Anna or watching her play in the park. She even began volunteering at the town's small library on Fridays. One crisp autumn morning, Isabella and Jason hosted a family stories event at the cafe. Children gathered with their parents, hot cocoa in hand. Anna stood in front of everyone, proudly holding a drawing. It showed 3 people, Mommy, Daddy, and her, standing in front of the cafe. "This is my favorite story," she said, voice clear, "because we live in it." The room fell silent, then erupted in soft applause. Margaret, seated in the back, wiped a tear. After the event, she approached Anna and handed her a small box. Inside was a silver butterfly hair clip. "This belonged to your mommy when she was your age," she said. "I think it suits you perfectly." Anna gasped. "It's magical." Isabella looked at her mother, eyes full. Margaret simply nodded. Later that night, as Jason closed up the shop, he paused by the door and looked in. Isabella and Anna were curled up in a corner, reading. The light from the lamp fell gently on them. For a moment, he said nothing, just watched, heart full. He hung a small wooden sign above the door. Welcome home. The next morning, Anna stood in front of the mirror, the butterfly clip in her hair. Do I look like a fairy tale princess, Mommy? Isabella knelt beside her, kissed her cheek. You look like someone who belongs exactly where she is. And for the first time, Isabella realized this was the story she had always wanted to live in. The last light of day spilled gently through the windows of the little wooden house by the lake. The fireplace crackled softly, casting a warm golden hue across the worn floorboards and shelves filled with books, toys, and tiny wooden animals. Jason sat on the couch, his arm resting lightly around Isabella, who held a soft blanket across her lap. Anna sat cross-legged between them, still in her Monday pink dress, flipping through the final pages of a well-loved storybook. She closed the book with a quiet snap, her eyes bright. Then, with the confidence only a 6-year-old could have, she placed the book in Isabella's lap and looked up at her with a glowing smile. This is our story now, Mommy, she said simply. Isabella felt her breath catch. The word Mommy had come naturally, effortlessly. No hesitation, no second guessing, just truth, spoken by a little girl who had chosen her long before Isabella realized she had chosen them too. Jason turned toward them, his eyes glistening, pride and peace in every line of his face. Isabella looked at him, then back at Anna. She brushed a strand of golden hair from the little girl's face and kissed her forehead. Jason reached over, resting his hand atop both of theirs. No wedding bands, no official vows. But everything that mattered was here. Trust, warmth, belonging. I used to think stories had to end with a perfect chapter, Isabella whispered. But I think the best ones are the ones you never want to stop reading. Jason nodded. And the ones you write together, he added. Outside, the last rays of the sunset faded into twilight. The wind rustled the leaves just beyond the porch. Inside, the glow of the floor lamp and the quiet comfort of 3 hearts at rest filled the room. Isabella leaned her head on Jason's shoulder, and Anna curled beside them, her breathing slow, her fingers still holding onto the corner of the storybook. Softly, Isabella said the words she had once never imagined she would feel. The day I thought I regretted the blind date was the day our story began. The camera pulled back slowly, past the bookshelf, past the steaming mugs of cocoa, past the photo on the mantel of a smiling family of 3. Then out through the window where the little wooden house stood, aglow with soft light in the middle of the quiet town. And inside, wrapped in warmth and love, a family not born of blood, but of choice, laughter, and faith. A story that had once seemed so unlikely. Now, the only one they wanted to live in. Forever. If this story touched your heart and reminded you that family is not always by blood, but by love and choice, then you are not alone. Sometimes, the most unexpected meetings lead us to the home we never knew we needed. Thank you for sharing this journey with us. If you believe in kindness, love, and the quiet magic of everyday people, subscribe to Kindness and Love Tales. We bring you heartwarming stories like this every week, because love deserves to be told. Hit that subscribe button, and remember, every great story begins with a little bit of hope.